Committee. We thank you very much for your testimony and for your service to the United States. Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, of course, requires the Congress to conduct an actual enumeration of the population every 10 years, and ever since the very first one was done by my favorite founding father, Thomas Jefferson, we've met that goal, although it hasn't always been under budget, and that's a primary source of concern for this subcommittee, and a focus of a lot of our conversation today is what we can do to ensure that the census is done under budget. We are responsible as stewards of our constituents' very hard-earned and very scarce tax dollars. We want to make sure that these very, very precious and hard-earned tax dollars are spent frugally and carefully and wisely. So today I hope you'll be able to discuss with the committee and convince us that the Census Bureau is working diligently to ensure not only an accurate enumeration, but to be sure that it is under budget. Unfortunately, I'm told that the department plans to notify the committee, Mr. Serrano, that they're already expecting a $309 million cost overrun. And that just is, and that's in the IT system. It's just a real source of concern because this seems to happen every 10 years. That's a 48% increase in cost, and we want to hear from you today what happened and why, and what's being done about it to hold people accountable and in order to ensure that this doesn't happen again. I think that's probably one of our biggest frustrations. Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Ming, for being here. One of our biggest frustrations in government is the inability to hold people accountable for making bad decisions and misspending our very precious and scarce hard-earned tax dollars. It's particularly discouraging to see this happen so early in the process when in 2008 your predecessor came before the committee to ask for a $930 million bailout. That GAO has also once again placed the census on its high-risk program list, just as it did for the 2010 census, and I look forward to hearing from GAO about what that means for the cost and schedule of the 2020 census. Also concerned that I understand that the plan is to wait until very close to the actual census to do an end-to-end test. I want to be sure to discuss that as well because that seems very, very risky and a little nerve-wracking. Also, with all the very sensitive personal data that the census is collecting, it makes the Census Bureau a prime target for cyber criminals and hostile state actors. And invasions of privacy are very, very important. We, as I know everyone of this committee believes that privacy is our right to be left alone, and our right to privacy is one of our most sacred and important constitutional rights. And we are, all of us want to be sure that Americans' personal data collected by the census is safe. Beyond the 2020 census, I'm very concerned about the American Community Survey. I've had a lot of complaints from constituents about the intrusive nature of the survey. It's got over 140 questions on it. I know the world's gotten more complicated than it was in 1790, but that original census had only 6 questions. Before we proceed, however, I would like to recognize my good friend, Mr. Serrano from New York, for any remarks that he would like to make.
I want to tell you what an honor and a pleasure it is for me to be back here in this committee where I was ranking member years ago. And it's no secret in Congress that it's my favorite committee. And through some maneuvering and fate, I'm back again. I also come back this time with a different little opening statement. I no longer have to make that disclaimer I used to make about having a brother who works at the Census Bureau, because he's since retired and enjoying the grandchildren and not missing the Census Bureau a lot, but he's watching us on the internet right now. I'm pleased to return as ranking member of this subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, at a crucial time for the Census Bureau. Preparations for the 2020 census are at a critical juncture, and there's a serious need to ensure sufficient funding for the decennial census and for the many other surveys and products that the Bureau undertakes. I believe all of us here can agree on the vitally important role that the 2020 census and the American Community Survey play in producing reliable information on housing, demographics, and socioeconomic conditions in our country. And I believe that it is this committee's job to provide the Bureau with the resources to do its job. Since 1990, I don't think anybody on this committee was around then, a national census of our population has been conducted every 10 years, as required by the U.S. Constitution. With each census, additional information has been incorporated to help us better understand and address the challenges we face as a nation. Incorrect census data has serious and lasting implications for our communities. We have an obligation to ensure that the Bureau is able to accurately account for every household and that all of the collected statistical data remains properly secured. The President's skinny budget, as it is called, for fiscal year 2018 includes $1.5 billion for the Bureau. My concern is that this funding level falls short of what is needed to help ramp up ongoing preparations for both the 2020 census and the other important surveys conducted by the Bureau. As the requested total is actually $133.6 million below President Obama's request for the previous fiscal year. Normally, we would expect to see significant increases in the Bureau's budget at this point in the decade as we get closer to the census count itself. Underfunding and delays in enactment of the Bureau's budget have already had consequences. For example, last year, the Bureau discontinued plans for the 2017 Puerto Rico census test. The overall funding track for the Bureau is well behind the levels previously appropriated for the 2000 and 2010 censuses, and I am seriously concerned that the Bureau won't be able to match the historic levels of compliance from the 2010 census. I am aware that the Bureau intends to save money through several innovations, including by implementing an online self-response option. Although the Internet self-response survey have a Spanish language option, we must make sure that the field testing of a full Spanish language survey prior to the 2020 census is in place. It is also important to test non-traditional addresses located in Puerto Rico and on tribal reservations. I'm also concerned about the steps needed to reduce the anxiety that generally arises throughout the minority communities during the census count. These feelings, Mr. Chairman, this is very important, of distrust are an all-time high as, and I say this with full respect to the office, the new president continues to use anti-immigrant rhetoric. In prior cycles, the Bureau conducted significant media and partnership campaigns to help participants understand the importance of the surveys and the fact that they were kept very confidential. However, if we continue limiting the Bureau's resources, we run the risk of facing similar challenges to those of the 1990 census, which had an extremely high non-response rate. Additionally, migrating from traditional methods of paper survey collections to an internet-based model without robust cybersecurity funding will ultimately put respondents at risk should they opt to use technology. In a world with growing cybersecurity threats, the collection and protection of personal information online should be a priority. We should continue to safeguard individuals using electronic devices and ensure the public's trust that their confidential response data will remain private. That, Mr. Chairman, as an aside, will be one of our greatest challenges and the Bureau. We want people to step up. We want people to be counted. And in a very difficult immigration atmosphere, we especially want people who are here under our roof to come forward and not be concerned that that's going to impact on something else. We can't use the Census Bureau to be the tool that goes after undocumented aliens in this country. Thank you once again to both the Census Bureau and to GAO for testifying today. I look forward to discussing these important issues with all of you. As I close, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make my first request of you, and that is, as you know, I was born in the American territory of Puerto Rico, And I still can't understand, notwithstanding, and I say notwithstanding, not ignoring it, how the Constitution is worded, count the people amongst the states. But the Constitution at that time did not envision the fact that there would be people living as American citizens in places other than the states. So if you look at the census count, you get, for argument's sake, 350 million Americans, right? Then you get underneath the numbers for Puerto Rico and some of the other places, and then you don't get a total of the population. Ironically, and I hope no one puts this down as an anti-immigrant statement, but you could living in New York or in your state, undocumented, and you'll get counted in the regular population, but you could be an American citizen living in the Virgin Islands of Puerto Rico, and that get counted in the regular count. Or your number shows up in the regular count. So let's get together and move it up a couple of lines. Thank you.
I really am so glad to have you. One of the principal selling points for me when I was asked to serve on appropriations was I could be here on this subcommittee to help NASA restore NASA to the glory days of Apollo and beyond, and the National Science Foundation, and to help our law enforcement officers. The Department of Commerce, of course, it's great. It's a great committee, and everything we do is pure good. So I'm delighted to have you here, gentlemen, and we'll start with you, Director Thompson. Thank you very much for your service to the country, and we look forward to your testimony. And we'll enter your statement in its entirety into the record, and we welcome a summary of your written testimony. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Culberson, Ranking Member Serrano, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on the 2020 census. I'm proud to report that we are on schedule and remain on the critical path to readiness. The 2020 census will be the most automated, modern, and dynamic decennial census in history. The innovations we're implementing will lead to significant cost savings, and we have a very robust testing cycle to prove in these innovations. This year, we successfully conducted the 2017 the 2017 census test, and we're well on our way to the 2018 end-to-end census test. The 2020 census has been added to the most recent high-risk list from the Government Accountability Office. This is not unusual. The 2000 and 2010 censuses were also on this list, which reflects the complexity, scale, and importance of conducting a fair and accurate census. This decade, the complexity is heightened as we replace a paper and pencil-based design with innovative technologies. We have robust controls in place to mitigate the risks that are inherent in carrying out this constitutionally mandated task. In the final years of the decade, risk management is critical to our operational plan for 2020. As we plan and test the 34 operations and roughly 50 systems that comprise the 2020 census, we're rigorously managing, monitoring, and mitigating risk. The Census Enterprise Data Collection and Processing Program, or CEDCAP as we often refer to it, is an agency-wide effort to integrate and standardize data collection and processing services, and is a critical part of our preparations. Another important aspect is our ongoing work with our colleagues at the GAO and the Office of the Inspector General. I discussed the steps we're taking to mitigate risk in greater detail in my written testimony. The specific areas we're concentrating on include, first, cybersecurity, fraud detection, and ensuring the public's trust. We're actively securing our systems and devices for the 2020 census and its field test, while ensuring that we prevent fraud and cyber attacks. Second, ensuring systems readiness. We've developed and field tested proof of concept systems, and our design is supported by findings from census tests. Now that we've awarded nearly all of the key contracts for 2020, we're finalizing our system of systems ahead of the 2018 end-to-end census test. Third, we are refining our field procedures through testing. Fourth, we are managing the integrated master schedule for the 2020 census and its supporting programs. And lastly, documenting and validating our 2020 census life cycle cost estimates. As I mentioned in my written testimony, we have a cost overrun with the CEDCAP program. We regret the substantial underestimation of this program's costs for several years. Last May, after a rigorous analysis, we selected a commercial off-the-shelf platform integrated with select custom solutions. We decided to adopt proven technology in order to reduce risk. Following this decision, certified cost estimators produced updated program estimates and an independent cost estimate for CEDCAP. The latest cost estimate for CEDCAP is $965 million, which is $309 million higher than the original estimate from 2013. The primary reasons for this disparity are: our first estimate was created by subject matter experts rather than certified cost estimators. Secondly, since we hadn't yet built prototypes in 2013, we underestimated how much work it would take to translate our business rules into detailed technical requirements to deliver a secure, scalable data collection system. And thirdly, we had a schedule disconnect that did not accurately baseline all of our milestones to the 2020 census integrated master schedule. We are committed to transparency with the Congress and our stakeholders. We'll work to address your concerns as CEDCAP continues to mature and evolve. The higher cost estimate reflects how much we've learned over the past 4 years. We are confident in the latest estimate because it's been independently verified, it employs best practices, and it incorporates detailed requirements. Although we've experienced a cost overrun, the technical implementation of CEDCAP is progressing well. We've successfully deployed solutions for the 2017 census test that's now underway, and we're well positioned for the 2018 end-to-end census test. There are many challenges ahead, but we're confident that with appropriate funding levels, we can successfully execute a high-quality 2020 census. 2017 and 2018 are critical years in the census cycle. The funding we receive will have a great effect on the outcome of the 2020 census. The 2020 census remains our top priority, and we appreciate, and I emphasize, we appreciate the support we've received from the Appropriations Committee. Thank you very much. I thank the committee for your interest in our work, and I look forward to discussing the challenges we face and how we're addressing them, and to continue our productive relationship with the GAO in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Thompson. And now to recognize Mr. Goldenkoff. Thank you for your testimony, and your written record. Your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety.
Well, thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. Chairman Culberson, Ranking Member Serrano, members of the subcommittee. GAO is pleased to be here today to discuss the Census Bureau's readiness for the 2020 head count. The single greatest management challenge now facing the Census Bureau is how to conduct a complete and accurate count of the nation's large and diverse population while keeping costs in check. At $12.3 billion, the 2010 census was the most expensive enumeration in U.S. history and 30% higher than the $9.4 billion spent on the 2000 census in constant 2020 dollars. While some amount of cost growth is to be expected given the nation's growing population, the average cost of counting each housing unit has escalated from $16 in 1970 to $92 in 2010, also in constant 2020 dollars. A key driver of the cost growth is that the nation is growing larger, more complex, and more reluctant to participate in the census. To help control costs while maintaining accuracy, the Bureau will use new procedures and technology for 2020. If they function as planned, the Bureau estimates it can enumerate the nation at a cost of around $88 per housing unit. At the same time, however, these innovations introduce new risks, and we have become increasingly concerned about the Bureau's ability to conduct a cost-effective head count. And these concerns led us to add the 2020 census to our high-risk list earlier this year, as was previously mentioned. So my remarks this morning will focus on the Bureau's progress in rolling out the new census-taking procedures, as well as some challenges that the Bureau has been having in developing reliable cost estimates. I'll then turn it over to my colleague, Dave Powner, who will then discuss the challenges the Bureau faces in implementing and securing critical IT systems. The bottom line is that while the Bureau has made considerable progress in redesigning the census, continued management attention and congressional oversight will be needed in the short time remaining until Census Day to ensure the Bureau's preparations stay on track. The new census-taking operations include greater use of automated data collection methods to improve the efficiency of field operations, use administrative records in place of data collected by enumerators in certain instances, verifying addresses using aerial imagery and other in-office procedures rather than going door-to-door as was done in prior decennials, and fourth, allowing households the option of responding to the census via the internet. While the new methods show promise for controlling costs, they also introduce new risks, in part because they include new procedures and technology that have not been used extensively in earlier decennials, if at all. One of our concerns centers on the high number of non-interviews that occurred during a 2016 test held in Harris County, Texas, and in Los Angeles, California. At both locations, the Census Bureau experienced a large number of non-interviews. As much as 30% of the workload where either no or insufficient data were collected. Going forward, it will be important for the Bureau to identify and address the factors that contributed to the non-interview rate, as they could have implications for the cost and accuracy of the final population count. Another risk area is the quality of the Bureau's estimate of the cost of the 2020 census, which does not conform to GAO's best practices. Quality cost estimates can help an agency manage large, complex activities like the decennial, as well as help Congress make funding decisions and provide sufficient oversight. However, the Bureau's October 2015 cost estimate only partially met the characteristics of two best practices, and those were being comprehensive and accurate, and minimally met the other two best practices, and those are being well documented and credible. Additionally, the Bureau has not published an update to its October 2015 cost estimate, yet several events since then, including changes in system requirements and testing strategy, suggest that the cost of the current design, around $12.5 billion, could be higher than planned. So this concludes my prepared remarks, and I'll now turn it over to my colleague Dave, who will discuss the risks facing the IT systems.
Chairman Culberson, Ranking Member Serrano, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting us to testify on the Bureau's plans to deliver and secure key technologies for the 2020 census. Utilizing an internet response, mobile devices for enumeration, and cloud solutions are important steps to improve our nation's response rates and secure citizens' data. The Bureau's track record for delivering IT for previous decennials is not good. Unfortunately, we see similar issues with 2020. Late starts, schedule pressure, and not enough transparency. This morning I'd like to discuss what needs to be done to deliver and secure these technologies for the 2020 decennial. There are three areas that require congressional attention associated with the technology. They are schedule, security, and cost growth. I'd like to expand briefly on each of these. Starting with schedule. The Bureau needs to deliver about 50 systems for the 2020 decennial. Some are new systems and infrastructure, while others are changes to existing systems. Clearly, the internet response capability, mobile devices, and the centralized operations component are critical systems. These systems need to be ready between August of this year and early 2018 for a key end-to-end test. We have concerns about the readiness of the systems for the 2018 test, as does the technical integration contractor. Also, decisions still need to be made about key infrastructure, data centers, network and security operations, as well as commercial products, including those for the internet self-response. These pending decisions will further compound the schedule issue. We will be tracking these issues and the readiness for all systems. Turning to security, the Bureau needs to continue its diligence in this area since it has been the target of recent cyber attacks. We have ongoing work that will focus on the Bureau minimizing the threat of phishing, securing 400,000 mobile devices, ensuring security of cloud services, and properly configuring all 2020 systems. To ensure that all systems are as secure as possible, the Bureau needs to develop security plans, assess security controls, fix known deficiencies, and have the proper sign-off from both the Chief Information Officer and the head of the Decennial Office to ensure that each system is ready for operations. The Bureau has such a process, but we have concerns about whether this process is consistently followed and whether all systems will have the appropriate sign-off to ensure that personally identifiable information is protected. We also recently learned that about 50 additional security engineers are coming on board to further support this process. Finally, we have concerns about the cost growth associated with the technologies. The Bureau estimates that it will spend about $2.4 billion on IT. We expect these costs to rise significantly. Specific IT contracts to watch are, first of all, the SEDCAP contract that Director Thompson talked about, which has already overrun hundreds of millions of dollars. Also, another contract is the integration contract that had original price tag of $900 million, and also the call center contract whose cost is around $500 million. The two previous concerns we discussed regarding schedule pressure and additional security will also add to the IT costs and will ultimately eat into the anticipated $5 billion in cost savings. In conclusion, schedule, security, and IT cost growth are major concerns that we will continue to monitor for the Congress. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Powner. We included language in our bill last year and this year fencing some of the money for the census until we made sure that the GAO was in the loop. We appreciate your work, Director Thompson, and everyone that works on the census. We know how important it is. We know how vital it is. But we really, I know I'll be working closely with everybody on the committee. We really need to ride herd closely on this, and I want to make sure GAO is looped in. The list of concerns that Mr. Powner just went through, I mean, it's distressing to see the 2020 census look like it's headed the same direction as the 2010 census with terrific cost overruns. It's just not acceptable, particularly in this environment when our when taxpayer dollars are so hard earned and hard to come by are really going to be scarce in the 2018 budget cycle. It's going to be a tough year. So what will the total cost of the 2020 census be, Director?
Thank you, Congressman Culberson. At this point, we are working very hard on combining the results of our testing over the past 4 years, looking at what we're going to be doing with the 2017 appropriation we just received, and we're really looking forward to working with the committee on the 2018 appropriation. We're glad we're a priority in the President's budget. We're very, very happy about that, and we're looking forward to that process. As part of that process, we will produce another full cycle estimate of the census costs this summer.
Well, I heard Mr. Powner say that you're not following best practices recommended by GAO and using certified cost estimators, that you had to bring in, and I heard you say you had to bring in certified cost estimators to reevaluate the cost of this SEDCAP system, and that resulted in this huge overrun.
So we.
Why not just as, like, autopilot, you using certified cost estimators, right? And that's what your recommendation is for best practices?
Yeah, we need solid baselines.
Yeah,
We need solid baselines so we can measure how we're doing.
exactly. I mean, why aren't you following
So-
what GAO's recommended just across the board?
We really appreciated the feedback we got from the GAO
Yeah.
on 2015, and we have been really aggressively moving forward to address their concerns. So we do have a number of certified cost estimators now on staff at the Census Bureau.
Sounds like it had to
We
happen,
have,
though.
we have,
Are you using them? I mean, I just
Yes.
heard GAO tell me they're not in place. Did I misunderstand?
I don't think the GAO would say they're not in
Yeah,
place.
Those are
Make
what,
sure I understand what
they
you're
hired,
saying.
they recently brought on board additional security engineers to help with their security processes where we have the sign off that the systems are
Yeah,
secure.
on security, but I mean,
On
the
the
certified
security.
cost estimators is what I'm asking about. And
Yeah,
the
we-
best practices you recommend.
Our understanding is that they have been beefing up their expertise on the cost estimation side, and it's certainly better than it was. This has been a long-standing issue with the Census Bureau, going back to, I think, 2008 was one of our first reports on the challenges they face in developing life cycle cost estimates. They have made a lot of improvements since then. So by bringing in more experts, by trying to develop better processes, but there's still a ways to go. And as we mentioned, that the last estimate was October 2015.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything since then, and so we can't say the extent to which they've made progress on our recommendations, or if the cost estimates have addressed these our leading practices better than they have.
Well, forgive me for interrupting you, Director Thompson. Please continue, and if we could, answer that critical question.
Well,
What is
no,
it
I mean,
this is likely to cost?
like I said, our best estimate right now is about $2.5 billion for the 2020 census. That estimate will be refined, as I'd mentioned, over the summer as we get, maybe I missed the 2.5. I think Robert had said 2.5 in the testimony.
12.5.
I think 12.5. I'm sorry, not 2. No,
12.5.
I wish it was 2.5. It would be, I'm sorry, I misspoke, 12.5.
We'd be delighted,
Yeah, I would be too. I'd be,
He was ready to endorse it.
yeah, no.
Sold,
no,
done.
no.
We've done our job.
I'm sorry very much. Thank you, Colin.
I
But-
think your whole staff back there just had a heart attack.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. But importantly, we are working with the GAO on this. One of the things they also mentioned was that we needed to improve our documentation. We've been working very hard on improving our documentation, underlying our estimates. And even more importantly, as this next estimate comes out, we will be working with the GAO to make sure they understand what's in it independently from us, so they can report to you on the quality of that estimate. And we believe, but we have to demonstrate this, that they will find it to be acceptable.
That's terrific. I really want you guys arm in arm on this.
Can I think one item that's very important is when there are changes in the baseline costs, that needs to be disclosed quickly. That's why transparency is very important. As an example, and I don't want to pick on this too much, but the SEDCAP overrun, we did a report on SEDCAP not that long ago. In the SEDCAP, we talk about a $309 million overrun. I think it's 417. Because I had a baseline cost of $545 million that was in a GAO report, and it went to 965, and if my math is right, that's over 400. So again, that's $100 million. There's larger issues than this $100 million, but the point here is when baseline costs change, you need to know about it, we need to know about it to help in our oversight with
Instantly.
you. Exactly.
Absolutely, and there are other changes to procedures that are taking place with how they're doing their address canvassing that could have cost implications, other changes to IT processes, and so the last estimate was 2015. Now here it is coming up in 2 years later and more, and now there could be these significant cost increases, and it's just we're not sure what's in there and how much of the cost and any cost increases are being accounted for.
Director Thompson, what's the cause of that? Because transparency is absolutely essential, and order for GAO, for this committee to know what's going on, and to be able to act and step in and help resolve some of these problems before they get out of control.
So we have been, so the reason is that we've been very, very hard at work looking at what it will take to develop our systems. Part of the process was that last year we started we started a really detailed what we call analysis of alternatives on our SEDCAP program, and at that time we were looking at a commercial off-the-shelf solution versus building in-house solutions. Now I'll get to why that's important, because we needed to finish that analysis of alternatives and understand what we were going to be doing before we could start working on what it would take to produce a life cycle cost estimate of that. Now, we've done that for the SEDCAP program. We've just finished that. But we had to put in place the processes we were going to use. We also had to bring to bear, with the vendor that we selected, our requirements that we determined through our testing.
Understand, the question is really about transparency and disclosing immediately some of the, that this is news to us. You think the cost overrun's likely to be $417 million. Has the Census Bureau been, have you all been able to get access as much as you'd like to the Census Bureau? I hope you guys are, literally, you should be working together like this. Are you?
I think we have a very good working relationship. I meet monthly with the CIO, and our team has access. I think there's still certain areas like this cost. I don't know what the IT costs are right now. I had a $2.4 billion total. I think the IT costs are going to be likely $1 billion more than that, if I did simple math. But again, this is where that should be very transparent, and hopefully
Absolutely.
this
That's what I'm
summer,
driving at.
hopefully this summer, the IT costs and the overall, whatever the increase, it's likely there's going to be increases, but if we can quickly disclose and manage it effectively, that's really what we want. I think the access to information is better. I think the one thing that we would like to see is just more dashboards. We have 50 systems to get ready. We have 50 systems to secure. We have costs. Those types of things should be transparent to you.
Absolutely.
Are
That's what I'm
25
driving at.
systems ready, 25 remaining? How many have the appropriate sign-off on security? That dashboard type of reporting should come to you readily. We have to work a little bit to get that information.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I think we do have an excellent working relationship, and also I've been involved with, doing census issues since 2000, and I think that the relationship, the institutional relationship between GAO and oversight agencies in particular in the Census Bureau has been better than it's ever been. Dave mentioned his meetings with the CIO. We have monthly meetings with the census director. So it is a very open process. We do share information. I think one of the issues is what we would like to see is better documentation. And this is consistent with the transparency that, it's fine to discuss these things when we have these informal monthly meetings, but it needs to be much more official than that. It needs to be something that we're able to share, that we're able to report on, and the documentation just isn't there.
Yeah, and it sounds like we've got some room for improvement here, Director.
Well, there's always room for improvement. And I don't want to downplay the importance of having GAO look at what we're doing as an independent entity. And we really do plan on being very, very open this summer in terms of what we've got, what the estimates are, working with GAO, working with your staff.
Immediate disclosure and full transparency is absolutely essential, and the cost overruns at this scale are just not acceptable. We've just got to get this under control. I don't mean to take so much time.
Yeah.
Let me pass it to my good friend, Mr. Serrano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that last point, you, Director Thompson, are telling us that this summer you'll be able to present a clearer picture of where you are, where you're going, and what to expect. Are you folks satisfied that based on past experiences with the Bureau and past conversations, come this summer you'll be able to get a better handle? If we were to have another hearing, if you will, in the early fall, would you be able to feel more confident that you know what's going on?
Well, if they deliver on that, and I think this has been the issue, we actually tried looking at the updated cost estimate. We started an engagement back in the fall when the new estimate was supposed to have been released, and then it's been delayed, and so we haven't been able to take a look at it, and so that's delayed our ability to review it, and that's been problematic. So yes, if it comes out as planned, actually the summer, we thought it was coming out in the spring. If it's delivered, yes, then we can start our work, but then it's going to take some time for us to look through it. It's a pretty lengthy process to apply our best practices and all the criteria. So, I think that, we'll see, the deeds will speak louder than words.
Director Thompson, I have a lengthy prefacing comment to my question, but I'm not going to read it. It's well written anyway. I don't want staff to think I'm not reading it for a bad reason. One of the biggest concerns that I have, and so many people have in this country, and it should be everybody's concern, is that some groups never get counted accurately. And we keep working on that, and we get better. But now, and I'm trying to be at these hearings, Mr. Chairman, and I mean that sincerely, I'm trying to be as balanced as possible, even though I don't work with that network, but, just being as balanced as possible. But there is a political atmosphere created during the presidential campaign where a lot of folks are afraid to even take their children to the bus stop because they think they're going to get deported. So if they're afraid of that, imagine how they're going to feel about putting information on a paper or a computer about the Census Bureau, about their information. So my question to you is, are you putting in motion anything to attempt to reassure these folks that they should be counted, that nothing has changed from the past, that this is not going to be used to determine immigration status, that has nothing to do with immigration status?
Thank you, Congressman Serrano. So I'll go back briefly to the 2000 census, when we started a program where we actually started paying for advertising so we could get our message on when people would see it. And even more importantly, we started putting resources into what we called a partnership program. And the purpose of this was to enlist partners. We had our people, we enlisted partners, network partners, so that local voices would explain why the census was important and why the data was confidential and would not be used for any purpose other than the mandated purposes of the decennial census. And we saw, as a result of that program, significant gains in the accuracy of the census relative to the 1990 census. That program continued in 2010, and we saw more gains. And so I can't stress the importance of being able to work at local levels, and we plan to do this. We've already started the program. We plan to do this in 2020, and it's going to be very critical that we have partners that will step up and speak on our behalf, and we would love, we'll work with you again to make sure we get a lot of the right people in your district in New York, because we want to line them up, and with you, Congressman Culberson, we work with all members, and I think we had 290,000 partners in 2010, and we want to try to exceed that goal, but that's how we have to solve that problem. We have to do it locally, and we have to empower people locally to talk about what's right with the census.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have to make sure that we create the kind of atmosphere that he's speaking about, that the director's speaking about, because, and let me first say I'm a Catholic, so I'm not attacking anyone's church or religion, but the Catholic Church went as far some censuses ago as to say, if you fill out the information, we can't guarantee that it won't be used to hurt you. I mean, that was a devastating comment coming from the church, but it came out of fear and their feeling that their role was to protect folks, not to turn them over to anyone. So they have an incredible challenge, we all do, because we want to know who's here. We're going to count people. Those other issues we have to deal with, we'll deal with them. I mean, today we're going to take a vote that deals with issues people thought we never were going to deal with, and yet we dealt with them. So it's a challenge, and I want to be part of that and assist you in any way. Very briefly, my last comment. You've had to change some of the plans you had because of delays and budgetary delays and other things. Do you think that those delays will now cost the census more to be conducted, or are they just a stumbling block that you can get over?
Congressman, some of them will, if we don't adjust for them, would result in increased costs. So, for example, one of the things we're doing is we're doing less in-office address canvassing, and that means we're going to have to do more in-field address canvassing. So that will be a cost increase. And in order not to increase the full cycle cost, we'll have to try to find an offset for that. But some of the changes that we've made do have the potential.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up, if I might. I'll preface my remarks by mentioning how obviously important this whole business is. I mean, the census is done, you know, it appears very early in our Constitution, in the text, and that's for a good reason. This is how we decide how many members of Congress get allocated to each state. It's how we decide how many members each member of Congress represents. It's how we decide not only that, but in terms of federal largesse, where it goes. Things like food stamps, so many other federal programs, they refer to the results of the last census to decide how much money goes where. So this is a really big deal, and it's one where we want to be very careful not to be penny wise and pound foolish. I want to start with you, Director Thompson. In response to my ranking member's question about concern of underreporting, people afraid to answer the questions, whether it's because they're afraid of having some cousin deported or because the Catholic Church scared them, or maybe an even broader concern, they're worried about having their cybersecurity violated. We have to worry about that. And your answer, Director Thompson, was, well, what we did in 2010 was we advertised. We advertised and we used local people to encourage people that it was safe and that their information would be safe and it's a good idea to respond to these questions. And you said it led to significant gains in accuracy of the numbers, something that we're all interested in here. We saw more gains, and you said it was critical that we have local partners involved in that advertising. The reason I raised that is in your written testimony, you outlined four what I regard to be rather troubling concessions you've decided to make in order to meet the administration's low budget request. I think some of these are penny wise and pound foolish. Your third point, Director Thompson, was the elimination of advertising in the 2018 end-to-end test that would potentially lead to higher costs later that I worry about associated with in-person follow-ups. If people are afraid for the reasons we've discussed and they don't respond to the much more cost-efficient methods of reaching out and getting information, then you have to send people out to follow up and it's much more expensive. But if you don't do the advertising, then it becomes that much more expensive and because you didn't have those significant accuracy gains. Am I correct in that? You do have the elimination of advertising in the 2018 end-to-end test plan?
Well, yes, and maybe not yes. So we prioritized our activities based on the budget situation we found ourselves in to really focus on making sure that our critical systems would be ready to test in the 2018 end-to-end test. We made a number of decisions. One of those was we did defer doing an advertising campaign in the 2018 end-to-end test. However, we have awarded a contract for advertising to Y&R, a good company, that actually, as an aside, happened to work on the 2000 census. And they are in the process of being on schedule to deliver a research plan and also a strategic plan for how we'll go about implementing the advertising. We expect to get that sometime this month or this spring, and that will be a great start to go forward with the advertising for 2020.
Okay, so yes, you're going to eliminate the advertising in the 2018 end-to-end census test, but the plan is not to eliminate it in the real show.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so that the statements you made to my ranking member are still hold true, that the advertising helps reassure people that cooperating with the census is safe and won't hurt them.
Right. We found there's two components to that. One is, advertising media, different kinds of media that you can reach people, and the other one is getting people, local people, our people to work with local people and organizations to get the word out locally.
And forgive me if I missed it, but then why wouldn't you do that in the 2018 end-to-end test? Wouldn't you want to replicate the same circumstance that you're going to use in the actual census?
So we made a number of really difficult decisions in 2017, and Congressman Serrano mentioned some of them. We had to delay some tests. But again, our focus was on risk mitigation or minimizing risk, and we saw the biggest risk, and also was our systems. We also saw that those were the source of our greatest savings for the 2010 census.
Another thing I want to raise is something that Mr. Powner brought up, and that is, you said security plans need to be developed. And if you're going to advertise to people that it's safe and your cybersecurity will not be violated, it has to be true. So did you hear his comment that when he said security plans need to be developed? Are they?
So I would like to turn this over to our CIO, Mr. Kevin Smith, who is responsible.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. So as Mr. Powner said, the security of systems is of utmost importance to us at the census for public trust as well as public confidence. There's a federal process we go through for authorities to operate, which he has mentioned that there's a business official, which is the head of decennial, and me as the technical official, the CIO of the organization, where we have a third party assess all of the materials provided by the developers of the systems who are supporting the systems to verify and validate that they've done all the due diligence possible to secure the systems. And we go through a regimented process of data collection to ensure we have everything in place to protect the data before it's done. And that official process we share transparently and openly with GAO on these as they go forward.
All right. I appreciate the chairman's indulgence. I have one more question. It's about LGBTQ questioning on the American Community Survey. In response to letters from more than 75 members of Congress asking that questions about sexual orientation and gender identity be included in that survey, Mr. Thompson, you wrote that your review of the matter concluded there was no federal data need to change the planned census and the survey subjects. Now, HHS, HUD, and the Department of Justice have all requested that sexual orientation and gender identity questions be included in future surveys. From many non-census surveys that have been done, we know that LGBT people face higher levels of poverty, particularly older LGBT people, and that LGBT young people are more likely to be homeless. And if we can't see the needs of the LGBT community from the census results, we can't design policies to respond to those needs. Mr. Thompson, how did you determine that there was no federal need for this information?
Thank you, Congressman. I would really appreciate addressing that. And first, let me state that we said was there was not a federal need to have it included on the American Community Survey. We were focused on that alone and did not address any other federal purposes. But the process we go through to put any question or topic on the American Community Survey is very formal. and that is the Census Bureau facilitates what goes on there. We do not determine the policies. We're a statistical agency, so our mission is to collect objective data. But having said that, we work very closely with the many other agencies to solicit from them what information they would want to see on the American Community Survey. As doing such, we have a very formal process that we go through with the Office of Management and Budget to work through requirements to determine if something should go on the American Community Survey. When we finished our assessment of those needs, we did not find the supporting information from federal agencies to include that information on the American Community Survey.
Thank you, Director. Ms. Bing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I wanted to echo our ranking member's comments about some groups being undercounted and how we always strive to do better. My question is specifically relates to my district, which is one of the most diverse districts in the country, but also throughout the country there are many various communities and groups that have traditionally been undercounted. For example, to reach my constituents, you would need field staff with multiple language, a wide range of language capabilities. So I was curious about the recruitment and the hiring process on how they take these language needs into account. The second part of that question, specifically about the American Community Survey, which is not currently translated into any Asian languages, is translated into Spanish. On the ACS, for example, one of the questions is, how well do you speak English? But that question is written in English, and so any respondent or any of our constituents who can't read English or have limited English proficiency would have difficulty in even answering this question. So what would it take for the Bureau to expand the number of languages need to be translated for the American Community Survey?
So let me hit the first part of your question about recruiting. So as part of our census recruiting process, our goal, and we really focus on this, is to recruit locally so that we send people in the neighborhoods that are representatives of the neighborhoods and understand the culture of the neighborhoods, which would include speaking the languages of the neighborhoods and knowing the appropriate times or the appropriate ways to contact people in neighborhoods. So a key focus of our recruiting is to hire people with the right language skills to go into neighborhoods. We also have expanded our language program for the 2020 census from 2010, for 2020 from 2010. I believe we had 2 or 3 languages that you could self-respond in 2010. Now we have 10 at least, and we might be able to increase that a little bit. We're doing some more work on that. In terms of the American Community Survey, it's always an issue of balancing the amount of money we have for that survey, and the budget's fairly tight in terms of, do we do data collection, do we do translation? But we have heard from a lot of constituents that there are emerging needs for languages. So I wouldn't say no, I wouldn't say yes, but we certainly take communicating with our respondents very seriously. And at a minimum, we do send people in person that do have the language skills to get the job done.
My second question is, I know the GAO study mentions increased use of, for example, verifying addresses by use of aerial imagery. I'm specifically concerned about urban areas, for example, or areas with newer developments. There are many types of unconventional housing, let's say people living in basements or attics, people living in multifamily housing where it looks like it's a single family but has like 4 doorbells on the front door that you might not be able to tell. Or even, some communities where you have a room and there are 5 to 10 people living in there. So what are some ways that we can better analyze those numbers? Either or, yeah.
Well, I would just like to say, well, first, I would remiss if I didn't say I was born in Forest Hills, so I appreciate the enumeration challenges there. But, certainly in an area that is diverse, and it's not just about data collection and translation, it's also having familiarity. It really starts at the very front end of the census when you're building the address list, the master address list, because that's sort of the control unit for the census. And so if you're excluded from the address list initially, then it's going to be harder for the Bureau to find you down the line. It doesn't mean that they won't find you, but it just makes it more difficult. And so that's one of the concerns that we have. It certainly makes sense to go to these in-office procedures because there are some cost efficiencies there, but what's not clear are do administrative records about a particular housing unit, address records from the post office, for example, aerial imagery, are they sensitive enough to capture those people who are, living in basements or attics or, and that's right now the big unknown. And, and we're waiting on the results of a test that the Census Bureau conducted to see is it sensitive, are these in-office procedures sensitive enough to capture people living in these unconventional living arrangements.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any updates, Mr.
So let me make it clear what we're doing here. Our goal is to find areas that are very, very stable in terms of the housing unit stock. And those we believe we don't have to canvass. If we have any doubt about the stability, like if something's been built, somebody's moved in, somebody's moved out, any kind of, and that could be from changes in the post office addresses or other sources. If we have any doubt, then we will go to canvass it in person. That's our goal. And so right now, what we've been seeing is that's what our estimates are based on, is what we're seeing in terms of what we predict as stability. As Robert said, we're also though doing some work where we're actually sending people out to look at those units that we think are stable to make sure that in fact they are.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Kilburn.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good to be back with you. Thanks for being with us. I want to start with a question of Mr. Powner. Congressman Farenthold and I recently introduced a bill called the Open Government Data Act, which is focused on making government data more available both to the public and to federal agencies to try to drive innovation, to try to drive efficiency within the federal government. I kind of want to get, as you're, obviously the Bureau, when it collects new data, it also utilizes data that the government already has. And I want to just get a sense from you, to what extent does that ability to access and use data that other federal agencies are already collecting reduce costs and drive efficiency within the agency's mission?
Let
Okay.
Robert take this.
Sure. No, it's something that it makes sense. Obviously, if the government already has that information on file, why not repurpose it? But again, just like the new procedures for building the master address list, the question is the limitations of those, and there's certain populations that aren't always covered by the different administrative records. And so it just, and this is, what it gets back to is the importance of testing. All these things are great ideas. And we said in our statement here, they do show promise for significant cost savings, but we need to make sure going into the census that they're going to function as planned. And so we know that there are some limitations to the administrative records. They do have promise for example, determining whether a home is vacant or not. So in the past, the Census Bureau would send an enumerator out to a household multiple times, and if that house was vacant, if you can determine that from postal information, from IRS records, then you can see the potential for the cost savings. What's not known is how well those procedures work under operational conditions. And so that's why, it just comes back to rigorous testing.
Okay. I know my colleague, Mr. Cartwright, asked about cybersecurity, and Mr. Smith, I kind of wanted to just touch on that a little bit more because obviously the threat of cyber attack is significant. And, you know, and the federal government has had challenges hiring people with cyber expertise. Is the Census Bureau leaning on the private sector, looking at public-private partnerships for trying to address these sorts of problems? And I just want to get just want to double-click on that a little bit more.
Absolutely, Congressman, I appreciate the question. So we are absolutely in the census not going about the cybersecurity challenge on our own. We have public and private partnerships, so we're directly connected with the Department of Homeland Security to help assess what we're doing and test what we're doing and help make recommendations to make it more secure. We're also working with private industry through our contracts as well as through third parties. We have that test our systems and the security of them. So as Mr. Powner mentioned earlier as well, some of the staff that's being hired is from the contractor side to ramp up to get ready to do the security things we need. Excuse me, the security things we need for due diligence to make sure we're prepared. But we engage within the Census Bureau to complement the skills that are hard to retain in the federal government through contracts. There is definitely a salary difference between private industry and federal government, which we go through those challenges, and part of that is to have the right staff support with a blend of federal employees and contractors to help you meet the goals and get the right skills in place.
Thanks. I guess finally for Mr. Thompson, I won't re-ask the question that Mr. Cartwright did about questions around sexual orientation and gender identity within the American Community Survey, other than to just say I joined 71 of my colleagues last year in a letter to you asking that that information be included. You've heard from a number of my colleagues around questions around underrepresentation. And I represent a district, we've got 77,000 military veterans, a lot of whom live in rural areas. And, you know, and their ability to access important federal programs, whether it be education programs or medical programs or what have you, is often tied to the census. And in the past, rural communities have often been undercounted by the census, and I just wanted to get a sense from you. It's sort of the flip side of Ms. Meng's question, who, you know, her concern is urban. I can understand and appreciate that concern for the cities I represent, but what steps are the Bureau taking to ensure that rural communities are fully counted in the 2020 census?
So thank you very much. So we don't use the same procedures for the census everywhere. So depending on the degree to which an area is rural, we will use different techniques. And by rural, I mean the addressing scheme and the addressing schemes and the sparseness of it. We will use different techniques tailored to those areas to make sure that we count everyone. Sometimes it involves a procedure called update leave, where we would walk around physically to the areas and leave a questionnaire. In other areas, it's something that we refer to as update enumerate, where we actually walk around and try to knock on the doors and get people to respond directly. But the idea is that we want to cover the whole country, and we want to do it well, and we'll go back as the right number of times to make sure we get an accurate count.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I want to follow up on the cyber question that Mr. Cartwright and Mr. Kilmer mentioned to you. Mr. Smith, you said you consult with third parties to kind of verify the security of your IT products, the websites. Have you talked to what third parties are you referring to? And I hope you're talking to the FBI in particular about how to secure your website and to make sure that your IT is secure.
Thank you, Chairman, for the question. So I'm not going to give vendor names that we're working with, but through the process of security, you have
Private vendors.
Yeah, you have private vendors come in and test, trying to break
Right.
into the systems, test the validity of certain artifacts. So we have those relationships. I will say within the federal government, I am working very strongly with the Department of Commerce to help us get relationships with these other entities to work with. Right now, we're working very tightly with the Department of Homeland Security. We are very open to working with other bureaus like the FBI, other ones that make sense. We just have to move forward with those relationships. So right now, we're only working with the DHS and the DOC on some of those endeavors in the public space.
I don't know about my colleagues. I know you all we've got a lot of faith in the FBI's cyber work. They really do superb work. I'd highly recommend that you consult with the FBI as well.
Absolutely.
Very concerned because when the website for the Obamacare was rolled out, it melted down almost immediately. You're going to have a whole lot more traffic.
Oh, yeah. And
That's
there
a big concern. I don't want. What steps are you taking to make sure you're not going to have a meltdown?
Okay. I appreciate the support on engaging with the FBI, and we'll go through with that. The steps we're taking, there's a very strong balance between the performance of a system and the security of the system. And so what we have done is take a very layered approach, and we have isolated parts of the system as much as possible. So when someone responds over the internet, we can apply the right security parameters to each one of these layers to not hinder performance. And it's just the way you go through design and architecture to make sure the system's going to be resilient and stay online. So we're taking those steps to do that. Instead of making all of the system in one big space, where if you apply too much security to it, it could bring the system performance down. We're isolating it at the right levels to make sure the benefits to the end user responding, as well as the security we have to put in place.
Mr. Powner, could you?
Yeah, if I could
From your
just make a
perspective, what-
suggestion here. So also, when you look at the chief information officers across the federal government, we do have typically a federal CIO out of the White House. That's an unfilled spot currently with the current administration. But we have a CIO council that coordinates on these issues. So, for instance, when you look at sharing of best practices in the cyber area, DHS is a good place to start. When you mention FBI, those connections through the CIO council and the federal chief information officer is very key, where you can build those types of relationships across agencies to make sure we're doing the right thing. That hasn't always worked well, but that's really what we need to strive to do, so that there is that sharing.
Yeah, Homeland Security would be another good one, but in the absence of someone filling that position right away, I hope you just reach out on your own.
Absolutely, and I'm supporting Mr. Powner's comments as well, yeah.
Could I ask you, have you evaluated the security, the steps that the census has taken to secure the information on their IT systems or their website, and could you
Yeah.
comment?
So when you look at the 50 systems that they do have a process that, they sign off that this is secure to test or to operate. But when you do you step backwards from that signature, you have to have plans, you have to do the appropriate control assessments. And, Mr. Smith mentioned penetration tests. That's very key, especially for public-facing systems. And I know they're doing that. So for all those systems, what we're looking at GAO, do they have the plans, the appropriate assessments, and then is that sign-off appropriate given the risks that are disclosed? There's going to be some holes and issues. We're not looking for perfection, but you want to make sure that, especially, I think there's close to 2/3 of those 50 systems contain PII information, personally identifiable information. You would want to crank up the security controls there.
Absolutely.
So that's where we kind of look at that. It's almost like certain things are more important, public-facing, those that have PII. So we're evaluating that and having a good conversation with
Okay,
his
good.
office
Keep
as
us
well
posted.
as,
That's really important.
Yeah.
To protect the privacy of our
absolutely.
constituents' personal information. And I think Mr. Cartwright's also correct about the advertising, and my colleague, Mr. Serrano, to make sure that you're communicating effectively with the public to know that they can participate, that it's safe, that it's secure. I understand you're going to be sending out emails as well, encouraging people to, will you be doing emails as well to people? Because I'm always spooky. If I get an email with an embedded link in it that's asking me to click on a link to go somewhere to do something, that's an instant red flag. I throw it in the trash if I don't know who it's from. I mean, that just opens huge problems, it seems to me, potential massive security problems for exploitation by bad actors. You know what I mean? What are you doing to?
Thank you How for the will question.
you approach that?
So as mentioned before, the communications, there's coming back with a plan of action to move forward. We're also engaging, as I said, with the Department of Homeland Security, and we're in, the CIO office, myself, is in very tight communications with the decennial office to discuss the type of communications we can provide in support of the census, but also in support of the right secure communications. So we're going through the evaluation of those steps right now to see which ones make the most sense and which ones don't. But your point is very valid. Just emails do offer up an ability for phishing and other things that could happen, where we just have to evaluate what's in the best interest of the census.
Director Thompson, the Census Bureau has estimated more than $5 billion in savings for the 2020 census. You think those savings will materialize?
So I am very confident in achieving significant savings for the 2020 census right now. And the reason I'm confident in that is if you look at where the cost increases for the census have come, they have come from the complexity, for the most part. They've come from the complexity of conducting the operation to collect the information from those that don't self-respond with paper and pencil. And that's become increasingly more difficult. And the only way you can deal with that in a country as diverse as ours and growing diverse is you have to throw more bodies at it. So we are on track to automate that operation, get rid of pencil and paper, and that is going to generate significant cost savings.
What level of cost savings? You
so-
estimated $5 billion.
Right. That
Looking
is
for a number.
that is our current estimate right now. That might change over the summer.
Could ask
But there
Mr.
will be
Powner-
significant, I'm confident there will be significant cost savings.
That's a good thing, thank you. I want to ask, if I could, Mr. Powner and Mr. Goldenkoff to comment on that. How confident are you that they'll be able to achieve that $5 billion in savings? And
I think I'd say that it's at risk, and it's starting to erode, and the extent to which is unknown, but we have started to see some cost increases, and one of two things I think will happen. Either more money needs to be added to it, or, as Director Thompson mentioned, they start doing offsets, looking for cuts elsewhere, and those cuts can prove to be a false economy because they could lower response rate down the line, particularly in undercounted populations. So, the specific number at this point can't say, but I'd say it's definitely a risk.
Yeah, I think it's highly likely that the cost overruns from a technology point of view are going to eat into that $5 billion. I think that's highly likely. I think the question is, this is doable even with tight schedules and securing all this and the whole bit, but I think the issue is at what cost? At what cost? And historically, if you look at the previous decennials, there's been a lot of money thrown at this late to bail out late starts, some mismanagement and other things, and I think you're potentially heading down that path again.
it just can't happen. We just can't do that this time. What, Mr. Goldenkoff, steps could the census take to improve its cost estimation methodology?
Well, if you look at our criteria, our characteristics, as I mentioned, need to be comprehensive, well documented, accurate, and credible. And in each one of those areas, I mean, we have some specific things that the Bureau can do better. For one thing, for example, in the area of documentation, Bureau didn't show certain calculations. The Census Bureau didn't show how sources of information were incorporated. In the area of being comprehensive, which just gets at whether or not it's inclusive of all the different costs. Some of the things that we saw was it was unclear if just all the different costs were included in it, and there seems now we know that there's some things, at least in the estimate that we looked at, were not included. So it's basically continuing to follow those leading practices, and is also, as Director Thompson mentioned too, subject matter experts are important, but you need people, continue to rely on people with cost estimation expertise.
Absolutely.
And they take the advice of the subject matter experts.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, it's the cost estimators that need to weigh in.
The census is so important. We want to make sure it's done right, that you stay on budget. Mr. Serrano, I'd really like to work with you and working with our authorizers, our counterparts. Congressman Meadows, I think, chairs that subcommittee. I'm not sure who the ranking member is, but let's work closely with them, share ideas, put our heads together, see what we can do. Look forward to working with you on that. Recognize you, Mr. Serrano, for follow-up.
Thank you. One of the issues that has been discussed in our community a lot is this whole issue of combining race and Hispanic origin questions into a single question. Some claim, some people as prominent as the NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, claims that they believe it's a combined question with a detailed checkbox approach holds great promise as a means for producing less non-response, and fewer ambiguous and inaccurate responses. On the other hand, there are some folks who think that it may not help in getting a clear picture across the government in terms of who the people are. So what made you go in that direction? How long has this been being discussed? And secondly, is it a set situation? Is it going to happen? Is it being tested? And are you fearful of some of the things that have been put forward? And supportive of some of the things positive that have been said?
Let me first make sure that, that you know NALEO is on our National Advisory Committee, and they're well represented. They're there at each meeting, and they have been giving us advice on this. So our work on this started with the 2010 census, when we looked at testing a combined question. Those results proved to be very promising in 2010, but they also had some issues associated with them that were well documented through our research. So we have designed a program throughout the decade that culminated with a test in 2015. We called it our National Content Test. And this test looked extensively at different ways to use the combined question that would ask race and ethnicity in different ways compared to asking two questions. We have finished that test. We've documented the results. What we found was that an optimum question design would include a question on a combined question, because we saw much more detailed reporting, and we saw very, very accurate reporting. But importantly, another milestone has just occurred, and that is we don't do this alone. So we've been working with the Office of Management and Budget, who would have to look at the standards on how you collect race and ethnicity. And they've just closed a Federal Register notice on this topic, and a number of comments have been received regarding the combined questionnaire. And we're now into the next steps, where we're going to work with OMB to evaluate the comments and put forward a proposal based on those comments for the race and ethnic question for 2020.
Are you at liberty of telling us what their concerns are? OMB?
Oh yeah, no. There will be a formal response to the comments that come into the Federal Register notice that will be issued. Each comment must be addressed in terms of the deliberations that come about. So that will be there. I can't speak for OMB, but I'm sure they want to make the comments they received as publicly available as possible.
Yeah. Please understand, I'm not suggesting that I oppose this approach, but my questions was to try to get at what was the problem that we're trying to fix by doing it this way.
So one of the issues we saw was that in previous censuses, if we used the two-question format, which meant asking Hispanic ethnicity first and then asking race and origin, the census has a unique dispensation to ask an other race category. And we were seeing the other race category be about maybe the third biggest race category. And that was because a number of Hispanic respondents would answer other race and write in an Hispanic characteristic, like Latino or Mexican, and then that doesn't coincide with the OMB definition of race, so there's some other race, but we would count them as Hispanic from that response. But what we saw was there was some confusion there, and so by going to the combined question, we see that we're eliminating that confusion. We're also, by the way we've designed the combined question, we're getting much more detailed responses across race and ethnicity for almost all the racial categories.
So you would ask, are you Hispanic? And that would be the end of that issue.
And well, there'd be more details to it. I mean, are you Hispanic? And then there'd be options, Latino, Mexican, American.
Right. Understand. Now, the budget request from the president, the so-called skinny budget, for fiscal year 2018 includes $1.5 million for the Census Bureau. This is a very modest increase of only $30 million above the amount in the fiscal year 2017. However, the request is also a full $133.5 million below President Obama's request for the previous year. At this point in the decade, particularly given the very substantial investments in information, technology, and field infrastructure, that will be needed to ensure that the 2020 census stays on schedule. Shouldn't the fiscal 2018 budget of the Census Bureau be much higher than the amount proposed? And that's the question. I mean, I know it's a direct contradiction to my chairman, who wants it to cost less, but you know, my concern is counting everyone, and maybe I'm sounding like a Democrat. We'll worry about the costs later, you know. But that is so important because, as was said before, Mr. Cartwright, you get a good count. You bring dollars into communities throughout the country. Those dollars don't sit in somebody's bank account. Those dollars get used in infrastructure, in schools, and creating different situations. So the dollars don't die; they move within the economy. I find, and it's been a while, but we find that when we have people who are either still around from the old administration, or people who have situations where they have a certain amount of time to stay, it's always very careful how you ask the questions, because nobody wants to, upset the president. It's not a good person to upset. But anyway, or the chairman for that matter. That's why I think he's the greatest chairman in the House. Any comment on the budget that you're free to make?
Sure.
Well, you're free to make whatever.
No. So I think it was, we thought it was very, very important, that's the Census Bureau, that in that 60-page base or so blueprint, that the 2020 census was mentioned as a priority. I think that may have been one of the few domestic programs that was mentioned as a priority. We were ecstatic that was the case, because it demonstrates the administration's commitment to a fair and accurate 2020 census. Secretary Ross has also made it very clear that one of his top priorities is a fair and accurate 2020 census. So we're really enthusiastic. But the next step will be, I'm not going to get ahead of the president's budget, coming before the committee. But after the president's budget comes before the committee, we would be delighted to work with the committee on what we're going to do within the scope of that budget, and to discuss with you exactly what will happen. So we're really looking forward to that.
Okay. One last question, Mr. Chairman. I don't know, Mr. Thompson, if you yourself were involved in this, or if you remember when I asked that question years ago of why the territory's population were not included in the final number for the United States. I have relatives in Puerto Rico who don't get counted in the final number. I get counted in the final number. If I move back to Puerto Rico tomorrow, I don't get counted in the final number. And I remember that part of the argument was, by some people, that it wasn't constitutional. To your knowledge, is that still the argument, that it's not constitutional, or is it a matter of we haven't done it that way, so we're not going to change it?
I would have to research whether it's constitutional or not. I do know that's been a concern that you've expressed. It was expressed back even in 2000, and I can't remember what the resolution. I remember what the resolution was in 2000. I can't remember
they didn't get counted in the total population.
Right. I would say, though, that there is still time as we move towards 2020 tabulations to discuss that issue. I mean, we haven't finalized the set of tabulations exactly yet, so that could be discussed. But again, I would really have to look at what are the issues associated with that. I'm not prepared to say if it's
and by the way, I know you have issues that could be considered, could be by many people, much larger than the one I bring up. But, we talk about accuracy, and Mr. Chairman, when we put forth the population of the United States is such That's not true, because we're not counting the Virgin Islands and the Northern Mariana Islands and so on. And if Congress has seen fit to, without a vote unfortunately, but seen fit to have a representative from those territories, voting committee and so on, then why can't the census, reflect that population and those Americans that live in those territories?
The Constitution says that election takes place, is required by law, enacted by Congress, so it's up to us to decide, I think.
Right. And I know, I know the trick part here could be that it says you must count the people amongst the states, and they're not states. But it didn't say that they were going to be American citizens. They didn't envision American citizens living in anything other than states. And now they live in territories.
Right. I would imagine it's a pretty broad grant of authority to Congress to define how it's going to be enumerated.
Let's do it.
Question.
Count my cousin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. This is so important in terms of accuracy and cost effectiveness.
Let's all talk to our authorizers. Let's hope each one of us will take the time to go visit with the authorizing subcommittee and compare notes on what they've learned and what we can do together to enhance the accuracy of the census.
Now, Mr. Chairman, you use a phrase over and over about our hard-earned and scarce tax dollars. I like that a lot. Now, you're a fan of Thomas Jefferson. He wrote his own epitaph on his tombstone, and I'm wondering whether you've left instructions for those words to be on yours. You don't have to answer that, Mr. Chairman. But I'm in full agreement. I'm in full agreement that our tax dollars are hard-earned and scarce, and that's why it's so important that we get a cost-efficient census and an accurate one. And Mr. Smith, this follow-up question is for you. You've successfully identified yourself as the computer geek in the room. I am pleased that the Bureau is seeking to increase efficiencies and decrease costs by taking advantage of technological advances. But I do have a concern that this may disproportionately help certain well-connected communities. I don't mean well politically connected, I mean well cyber-connected communities, which could result in a relative undercounting of some rural or poorer communities with less internet access. To access the internet will not be undercounted.
Thank you, Congressman, for your question. Part of this is a balance of the technology solutions in place to help automate functions and improve the self-response in certain areas, but absolutely from places that do not have a high internet connectivity rate. From the self-response side, we will have to offer different ways for them to self-respond. But from the enumeration side, when we have designed, you want to fill in?
Jump in just a little bit, because I've been working on the design of this. So we realize that not everyone has access to the internet. And so we've been analyzing data, using data from our American Community Survey and some other data to identify areas where we should just mail a questionnaire out to begin with. So about 80% of the households in 2020, we estimate, will just receive a questionnaire right at the start and say, well, if you want to use the internet, you can, but here's a questionnaire, fill it out and send it in. Ultimately, every household will, if they don't respond, will get a chance to respond on a paper questionnaire. But in addition to that, for this census, for the first time, we're also offering the opportunity to call in and give your interview over the phone. So that's new for this census. So we're offering just lots of different ways for individuals to self-respond.
Okay. The last question I have is on this theme that the chairman has opened up with, and that we want you folks to work together. And we want you arm in arm going through this process. I served on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee for 4 years, and I've seen a lot of the GAO folks, and they are helpful. They are not annoying efficiency experts who are coming to count your paper clips. They're there to help you. One concern I had was the February 2017 GAO high-risk report raises significant concerns about the Bureau's ability to conduct a cost-effective census, primarily because of unsubstantiated cost estimates, new unused innovations, critical IT uncertainties. Over the past 3+ years, GAO has made no fewer than 31 recommendations to help the Bureau create and implement a more efficient and accurate census for 2020, but only 5 have been implemented as of May 2017. So, Director Thompson, we want to see more cooperation, not less. And 5 out of 31 is a lot less than I expect. Will you commit here today to work more closely with GAO?
And I wholeheartedly agree and second that.
Of course. I mean, we value our relationship with GAO. Let me also say, though, that we have prepared an action plan for each of the recommendations we've received, and we have a schedule to roll out the results of that action plan and resolve the issues. Some of the issues we're going to resolve as part of the plan for the 2018 end-to-end test. Some of the, I'm not trying to dodge the issue, but some of the recommendations are longer range, and they can only be resolved by doing the 2020 census. But we're working with GAO to make sure that we're in agreement on the schedule for resolving those recommendations, and we value the recommendations that we've got.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Great questions, and we obviously want to make sure that you've got the resources you need to do an accurate and fair enumeration of the American population. But I want to work closely with all of the subcommittee to find ways to ensure that you are weaving GAO into your day-to-day operations, that you're being absolutely transparent with us, with the American taxpayers, with the GAO, so we know right away if there's going to be a problem. It's really, really important. I wholeheartedly second what Mr. Cartwright just said. 5 out of 31 is just not. That's just not acceptable. Mrs. Ming.
Thank you. Director Thompson, I have a specific question regarding the Korean Americans in this country. I have a substantial number of Korean-speaking constituents in my district, and according to the American Community Survey, 76% of those constituents do not speak English very well. With that in mind, I'm concerned about the Bureau's ability to accurately capture information from and about this population. I understand that there were almost no Korean responses returned or obtained during the 2016 census test run. If that is true, how are you measuring the adequacy of your Korean language preparedness, and when can we expect the release of the full results from the 2016 census test?
So we plan to offer for this census self-response options in Korean, both internet and paper responses to assist in their enumeration. In the 2016 test, we did get Korean responses, but they came in on the English forms as opposed to the Korean forms, which means that where we tested, possibly we're in areas, even though we tried to get a diverse population where people did have the ability to speak English.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
I'll submit the remainder of my questions in writing. And Mr. Serrano, you have
The same.
Oh, very good. I want to truly thank each and every one of you and your staff for your service to the country, and we look forward to working closely with you to ensure that there is a fair, accurate census, and that you achieve all those savings you've identified, and perhaps even more. Thank you very much, and the hearing is adjourned.
Well, we survived the first one.